I'm Ashby, Executive Tax Board. And I do hear some feedback actually, so we're going to resolve that. I think good enough turn on your computer.
I'm muted right now.
All right, I'm not sure how. So, pardon me while we try to resolve. Okay. So Jordan, raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, fantastic. And I don't hear the feedback now, so I think that might have resolved it. So Jordan is helping us with the webinar today. She is our program director. So thank you very much, Jordan, for your help. Welcome to part 2 of our Business Prosperity During a Pandemic webinar series. So this is a series of webinars that we have created in order to provide techniques and strategies for people to be able to navigate through the situation we currently have with the pandemic. These webinars are free. The first 2 were sold out or nearly sold out. The next 2 webinars will be announced early next week. So the first 2 went quickly within the first 2 days, so we recommend that everybody keep an eye out for the announcement for that and then register as quickly as you can. During this webinar, polls will occasionally pop up. We'll try to read to you what the polls say. These polls are intended both to engage participants, attendees through the process, but they're also for CPE certification purposes. So do answer the poll questions if you are seeking CPE certification. At the end of the webinar, we'll be sending out a survey to everyone. We'll send out CPE certificates as the surveys are completed. You'll have until the end of the weekend to complete those surveys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@taxforward.org. And there'll be more information in the email with the survey link as well. Summaries from our webinars will be posted on our website over the weekend. If you hear or learn of something that we should share with others, please contact us. Let us know if there's a source of guidance, something funny that we can share with others. We would love to hear about it. So please reach out to us at info@taxforward.org. And so I'd like to start by thanking our panelists for participating in this webinar. I'm going to start by introducing Ann Diddlebock. Ann Diddlebock is the founder of CFO Wisdom. She has over 25 years of CFO experience, and included in that experience is turnaround experience.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Thank you, Ann. Second panelist I'd like to introduce is Arlen Meyers. So Arlen Meyers is the president and CEO of Society of Physician Entrepreneurs. He's also a lecturer at the University of Colorado, Denver.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. John Kogan is Director of Finance Performance Improvement at Armanino, LLP. He has over 20 years of CEO and CFO experience for companies such as Voodoo and Proformative, and he too also has turnaround experience. John,
happy to be here.
Thank you. And then Larisa Rapoport, and I'm sorry, Larisa, please correct my pronunciation. She is a partner at Squar Milner in the middle market consumer goods and technology section. She was a partner at DZH prior to its joining with Squar Milner, and she has over 20 years of experience in assurance, business advisory, and CFO consulting services.
Thank you, Ashby. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Rapoport. So you did a good job.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's start with the positives. What are the potential opportunities presented by this current situation? And Larisa, let's start with you.
Sure. So the way I see it, it's an opportunity to strengthen a relationship with your clients and focus on really what you do best. So what I recommend my consumer goods clients is to focus on e-commerce revenue stream that they currently have and deliver that first. Brick and mortar are probably not going to be as healthy or as surviving at this point. We don't know that, but the e-commerce is actually getting stronger. And yesterday I saw a report that is getting 50% stronger just this month alone. So I would definitely recommend focusing on that aspect, and also develop an online tool for communications with customers, or enhancing those, and internally as well. So that's what I would say the main focus should be. In terms of technology companies that I work with, they're actually doing not as bad. The only thing that I tell them to focus on right now is, well, not the only thing, but one of the things that they haven't been doing necessarily is accept credit card payments. So if before it was just wire transfer, ACH and cash, I would suggest start accepting credit card payments, because these are easier for their customers to process.
Are there some tools that you would recommend for that?
For credit cards?
Correct, for processing payments.
Yes. So in terms of the tools for credit cards, I don't have the answer for that right now. In terms of commerce, I would recommend talking to Amazon, specifically to Amazon, and seeing how you can sell on Amazon now. You know, Amazon is actually talking to more and more small and middle market companies to either increase their presence there or just start from the scratch. And they have resources for that. So I recommend that you do that. And there are people that specialize in Amazon specific sales as well.
And some of the tools that we use, there's several that we've used, but two of them are Stripe and Square, that make it a little bit easier. And Anne, I would imagine you probably have some suggestions as well.
In terms of credit card, or just in general?
For credit card acceptance or electronic payment acceptance.
Yeah, electronic, you know, I do think that you do anything that's easiest for the customer to get money into your coffers, right? I mean, that's just such a huge part of what we're trying to do now is reduce our AR, increase our AP. So there are web-based credit card platforms that you can get onto very quickly. You mentioned a few of them, and I think that's a good opportunity. I think in addition to that, if you want to move into away from the credit card, I do think this is a really good opportunity to look at your suppliers and understand if, obviously, if you have any other suppliers that actually could fill in and actually present a better opportunity. Maybe they would be better vendors or suppliers and partners moving forward. Maybe you get into, you diversify your product line, you bring in new product lines that could either have a larger margin or a larger distribution potential for just trying to generate income.
Okay, and I see from a message from Jordan that we're ready for the first poll. So Jordan, if you want to hop in quickly and read the poll to everyone.
Definitely. The first one is, how has the pandemic impacted your company's cash flow situation? First choice is substantially improved cash flow, moderately improved cash flow, no or marginal change, moderately reduced cash flow, or substantially reduced cash flow. I'll go ahead and leave that up for about 30 seconds.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah.
So, Anne, where do you see opportunities?
So I do think that we need to pull back from panic a little bit, and it's really difficult to do that. And I'm sorry for all of those that are, you know, in the bunker right now, because that's what it feels like. But I do think that we have to look at eventually whether there would be opportunities with either acquisitions, buying a competitor, whether you know, you may have some competitors that are moving out of that are going out of business, and you can increase market share at that point in time, but you have to be staged to get that market share. So there's a big focus right now on being able to have enough supply so that you can sell and have continuity in your revenue stream. And I know that that's really tough, but that's got to be a main focus. And you've also got to look at your backlog pipeline and try to have as much communication with those customers as possible so that you try to protect that future revenue stream that's coming through.
Mm-hmm. Those are great points. John, how about you? Where do you see some opportunities here?
Sorry, unmute myself. I certainly agree with everything that's been said. So far, opportunity number one is to survive, make sure that your company gets through, and that's tough to do when you don't know the duration of this downturn. And the last two major downturns we've had, pretty sharp down shapes and then a very slow recovery shape. So you really want to be looking at everything you do with an eye towards long-term survival. So that has to do with looking at every dollar you spend to make sure those are the right dollars. They're nice to have dollars and there are must-have dollars to spend. So you want to make sure you're thinking in those terms and are, just prepared for what might be a long winter. So the biggest opportunity will be survival, depending on the space you're in. Some folks won't make it. If you can make it to the far end, there will be far more opportunity for you sort of on the upside here. So I think that's where folks probably already are and certainly should be spending an awful lot of attention.
Okay.
Ashby, if I may add something, I would like to add that companies should really spend a lot of time now on their social media because people are online all the time and promote their product there. So that doesn't necessarily cost anything for time for the marketing departments of the companies, but I would definitely encourage that. And another thing that I would say is a must is to let your clients know that, or your customers know that you're still open and you're operating. That's the key.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, and it's also something that Arlen, when he and I spoke about this last week as well, that this is a great opportunity for businesses to essentially remake themselves or redefine themselves. And Arlen, I understand I'm paraphrasing, but as an example, it's a great opportunity to start leveraging and looking into essentially new markets, new tools that would help you expand or help your company expand client base and who you're able to reach out to and engage with. So to your point, Larisa, an example would be restaurants who might be struggling right now to the extent that they're allowed to by the municipality to continue to serve people remotely. So deliver food or offer takeaway, to be able to do that. There are bars that are creating events that are web-based events, but they're still able to sell, for example, tickets. In New York City, they're allowed to continue to sell alcohol that would be delivered to people, if I understand correctly. So different innovations that can be used in order to expand or at least continue to sell products, but through different means instead, or platforms. So Arlen, what are some opportunities that you see here for businesses?
Well, I'm a little bit different in that I deal in biomedical and clinical innovation and entrepreneurship. So we're talking about drugs, devices, diagnostics, digital health, care delivery, some med ed tech, some fintech. And each of those sub-segments obviously are under the microscope now. I guess the main point that I would make is that because what I call sick care, because we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system of systems. Because it's such a highly regulated industry, it takes a very long time for something to get invented or discovered, let alone get to a patient. The average time is about 17 years from discovery to getting it to be the standard of care. Now, the opportunity here is, as you already see, the rule is that rules and regulations create ecosystems. Ecosystems create business models, and business models either facilitate or impair innovation. And now you're seeing all kinds of rules and regulations being shuffled aside because of the sense of urgency. There's a risk to that. The latest example is chloroquine, used, recommended by the president for off-label use when there's absolutely positively no evidence that will do anybody any good. Now, I understand the issues because you're trying to balance the public safety with the economic health of the country. But we need to be careful not to go off the deep end. So what I would say is use this opportunity, whichever you're in, whether it's drugs, devices, or the things that I mentioned, to create, there is a sense of urgency. Rules are being shuffled aside, so it eliminates some of the friction getting ideas to patients. Manage your cash flow, as the other experts on the panel have indicated. Automate systems such that if to get through this, you don't need as many people. And at the end, the systems, whether it's robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. So I would take advantage of the fact that rules are changing. Another example is, now tele-anything. Well, it used to be that we couldn't, we practiced what I call black market e-care. In other words, you did a workaround around HIPAA compliant platforms. You use Zoom, you use WhatsApp, you use Facebook. Well, now they're putting those rules aside because of the sense of urgency. So I think you're going to see a radical modification of HIPAA. I think you're going to see all kinds of changes in rules and regulations, which should grease the skids in terms of getting ideas to patients. So in the immediate term, anything tele is hot. And everyone, now the bad news is people are trying to take advantage of the fear. So people are pitching all kinds of things to hospital systems to supposedly add value, but a lot of them are just trash. So we have to be careful about that. And in terms of what's going to happen, every single catastrophe in economic history ultimately results in significant changes in how people see things when they get out through the other side. Whether it was SARS, whether it was the 2008 crash, whether it was the Spanish flu epidemic, whether it was the tsunami meltdown, we've been through this before. And SARS, actually, in Hong Kong, was a dress rehearsal for Corona. And part of the reason they've been able to flatten the curve faster is because they're used to this. They responded immediately. And the trade-off, again, is between managing the disease and managing the economy. And the smart money is on managing the disease, because when you get a handle on it, the economy recovers. So the opportunities on the back end are process automation, telemedicine, which is actually kind of old news right now. I would say machine learning, population health management, biobanking, symptom checkers, remote care, and we're going to see significant modifications. Now, the good news is we waste about a third of the $3.7 trillion we spend on sick care. I think that this catastrophe is going to highlight that fact. And when we come out the other end, we'll eliminate a lot of stuff we don't need. A third of the visits are unnecessary. A lot of things we're doing by telemedicine now we'll continue to do and reduce the need for inadequate resource consumption. We're going to rethink the sick care workforce. And the good news is I'm hoping that that will right-size the sick care industry and transform it into a healthcare industry.
poll is taking place now. So Jordan, if you like to read through the poll. Jordan, you might be on mute.
There I am. Sorry, guys. All right, poll number 2. Which of the following steps has your business taken as a result of the pandemic? This one you can choose more than one. Hired more contractors, hired more employees, furloughed more employees, or furloughed employees, laid off employees, reduced hours, increased hours, reduced compensation, or increased compensation. I'll leave that one about 30 seconds too.
So Arlen, to summarize some of what you've been saying, essentially the companies that will succeed during this environment are the ones that are innovating, that are finding new ways to bring their product to customers, or finding new customers, or are the companies that are enabling other companies, other businesses to do that cost effectively.
It's both, and it's both. And I tell people that you're much better off selling the bullets than fighting the war. It's an old business model concept. Whether it was the Civil War and the people that actually made the stuff for the soldiers, they made a fortune. The people that built the Santa Fe Trail, the people that sold the stuff on the Santa Fe Trail made a fortune instead of the people that were actually just mining the gold. So it's on both ends, though. So if you're in the tools business, supporting whether it's biomedical research, a telemedicine infrastructure, an AI company, a machine learning, whether you're setting up a biobank for predictive analytics for Alzheimer's or any number of diseases, including the coronavirus, I think you're going to see a splurge in population health infrastructure as a result of this pandemic. And we'll be much better at predictive analytics. So when the next one comes, and there will be a next one, we'll be much better prepared to deal with a much more robust public health infrastructure.
Okay. And then to the extent that, so Anne, this question's for you. So there's a bunch of reasons why companies might need cash. To the extent that they feel that there isn't a way that they can retool, in effect, their business model, what are some things that they can do to protect themselves from a cash aspect, and also to be able to access cash?
Right. I think that there has to be a multifaceted approach to that. And I think some of this is very much based in common sense, and you have to live in that area right now because everybody's in the bunker, and they should be right now. So again, we want to protect our receivables coming in. We want to protect money coming in. So you should be on the phone with customers right now, trying to make sure that they can pay. If they can't pay, try to negotiate terms to just keep them in the system before they drop out, if they were to drop out. The other thing is, as you're trying to reduce AR in terms of delinquencies, you're trying to also boost AP. So you're going to be taking a really, really close look at any dollars going out the door. So those two would create a pool of cash in between if you're trying to get money in the door faster and trying to not pay out as much. I mean, the government has we could follow their lead because they're deferring tax payments, they're deferring student loan payments. So they're doing, in effect, what we should be doing in our companies. I think that if you need, I think it's common sense also, you'll cut dividends. If you, based on privately held companies, you'll be doing capital calls with owners trying to get money in if you need money, and that is a good opportunity. I think there are also lending, and this is tough, but I think there are a lot of people with dry powder out there. And I think that you could go look at these secondary markets that might have high interest rate loans if you don't currently have a line of credit, that you're going to have to pay for it, but it might get you through this short-term period. which hopefully this is a short-term period. I'm sure it'll have longer ramifications, but let's get through this really extreme period and just try to keep as much cash in-house and spend it just on revenue producing and employees, keeping employees in their seats.
Are there alternatives to cash that, for example, you can accept from customers or offer to vendors? Have you had an experience in a turnaround period where?
Yes, I think that we all have to be as creative as possible, but you have to understand the benefit to the company. So again, this is just negotiating out any deal. There's got to be some kind of benefit, whether that is retaining that customer, if you do some type of trade or some type of delayed payment, you have to understand that this is somebody that is going to be showing up for you down the road too.
Okay. And do you have any recommendations for negotiating the payables? So for example, is this a good opportunity to try to negotiate reduction in the amount?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think, you know, I don't know if this is going to be funny or not, but you should be in the first person in line for toilet paper on this. You need to do this right now, right? You need to be the people that are negotiating now, because once some of these negotiations are in place, then these companies may not feel like they have any more ability to negotiate and pay out. And it's similar to a bankruptcy. If you're first in line, then the chances of you getting money from them from a bankruptcy is a lot higher. So there is a sense of expediency, I think, in this whole process on both sides. I'd really work with your teams and deploy them immediately on both the AR and the AP side. And then,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Actually, I was going to jump to another question. So if you finish, okay. This one's actually for John though. So John, what would you advise companies that are in the midst or were in the midst of a transaction? So for example, I've heard from companies, people who were in the midst of an IPO, they were acquiring or selling, and this is dampened that. What would you recommend for companies in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to a lot of firms who have just had fundings halted or transactions dropped. So to the extent that you can, well, to the extent that you need that transaction to happen at some point in time, if you have any ability to forestall rather than let something fall apart, do that. That comes down to communication with whoever the other party is. So you definitely want to be communicating. In fact, you can say that across almost all the topics that we've covered here: receivables, payables, all of your operations, what your people are thinking. Certainly people you're trying to do transactions with, be upfront with them. I mean, everyone is feeling the shock right now. Nobody quite knows where it's going to go. I would set expectations that transactions are going to be really few and far between right now due to the uncertainty. But to the extent that you can get the folks on the other side of the table to agree to cool off instead of walk away, then you'll be able to fight another day. So that's something you should be angling towards. There's no secret sauce in an environment like this. Everyone is dealing with uncertainty. Even your investors, speaking of cash calls, and even your investors aren't certain what they're going to be able to pull in from their limiteds and whatnot. It just kind of cascades backwards. So keep those lines of communication open and see if you can keep folks interested via your communication and being open to push things down the road a little bit. Really tough for folks who need those dollars right now, but if you try and squeeze even tighter onto a deal, there's a greater chance you will lose it.
Okay, so we're gonna do another poll. Jordan, if you'd like to jump in and read those poll questions.
Yeah, sorry, I have an upset toddler over here. Poll number 3, how significant are the changes your company is making to its business plan this year? unsure, still evaluating, no change at this time, or moderate changes, material changes.
Right. And thank you, Jordan. I know we're all working from home, or most of us are working from home now with these changes. So,
Sorry if you hear a little guy coming in sometimes. He said he wanted to say hi.
well, tell him we say hi. All right. So, John, what would you advise on the acquirer side? Is this a great opportunity for the acquirers?
Well, you know, buy side is interesting. Number one, you have to be sure of your desire to spend your cash right now. It's one thing to have it in the bank. It's another thing to be looking down the road. Every company, even companies with large war chests, are looking at how this is going to impact them mid and long term. And, you know, they're probably reassessing what do we want to be spending money on right now, and to the extent that any deal you are looking to acquire is, you know, hitting a rough spot, and of course that's many industries right now, you're also probably reassessing what this impact is going to be. So it might look like you're in a great position to pick up something for cheap, but sometimes things are cheap because, well, the value isn't there. And also taking undue advantage of a company because you have all the leverage on the buy side is a great recipe for a disastrous integration that will not provide the ROI that you wanted. So I would say, don't stop what you're doing. We certainly, you know, want commerce and M&A to keep going to the extent it makes sense. But any buy-side player is going to be looking at the health of the industry, the health of the individual company that they're looking at, and kind of reassessing how they fit in their own mid to long-term plans.
Okay.
If I could make a comment about the startup and consulting and advisory world, because things are just a little bit different than some of the standard, you know, corporate things we've been talking about. And that's kind of the world that I play in. And some of the things that are helpful are, number one, you obviously have to be flexible with people that are thinking about hiring you now because they're gun shy, they don't want to spend their money. So you have to be flexible, even to the point where you barter for services until the turnaround. So if I need something and they need something and there's not money to be had, then we figure it out. Number two is go out of your way to add value to what the potential client wants, even if you have to do it for free for a limited period of time, just to build a relationship and build some good faith. And three, as indicated by the poll that you just took, a relatively small percentage of the respondents are making changes in their business model. I mean, what we're experiencing now, at least in sick care, is a glaring example of how broken the model is. So if you are not changing or thinking about changing your business model, once you get out of this thing, you're making a big mistake. So you have to be bold. And so as a consultant, you can provide the opportunity to show them the way. Here's what other people are doing. Here's how things are changing. Here's how you can take a stepwise change to your business model canvas. Here's how you have to re-challenge your business model assumptions. It's a really good opportunity to lead them out into the promised land.
That's a great point. Thank you, Arlen. Jordan, can you read the responses? Which received the most votes in effect for the last three questions? So you're muted.
I just shared the one from the last question. Is that what you mean, the significant changes?
For all three of them, yeah.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Do you want me to read them or do you want me to share them through the thing?
Just, yeah, read them very quickly. Just the one that had the most response.
So for the first one, how has the pandemic impacted your company's cash flow situation? It looks like there was a tie between no or marginal change and then moderately reduced cash flow. Those were both at 39% each with 19 votes each. For the second one, which of the following steps has your business taken as a result of the pandemic? 50% of the vote said reduced hours. So 24 out of 48 people said that reduced hours were the solution. And then for the third one that we just did, how significant are the changes your company is making it to its business plan this year? And a lot of you said, 22 people said still evaluating, 42%.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah.
And that's the poll that Arlen was referring to. So those are all very good points. Thank you for making those, Arlen. Larisa, so going back to cash and how people can access cash, people are looking at insurance now as well. What are some of the options that are out there in terms of insurance?
Sure.
And what can people do?
Before we get into insurance, if I may just talk about cash in general, I'm very surprised to hear that people are still in the mode of thinking that their cash flow is not impacted or not as much impacted. Maybe right now, today, it's not, it will be. So getting ready for that is the key. And we all know the expression of cash is king, and I can't emphasize that enough. So for the insurance, what I would say, that could help with your cash, because most of businesses, most prudent businesses have business interruption insurance. And business interruption insurance has a clause in there, which is normally called civil authority, meaning that if you're in lockdown or shelter in place or stay at home, I don't know the differences between those, but these are civil authority guidelines that people need to comply with, and that might trigger your business interruption insurance, which would then potentially might reimburse you, depending on the policy, depending on the conditions, depending on the losses that you sustain. It might compensate you for some of the losses. So I would say definitely pick up the phone with your insurance broker today and review the phone with your insurance broker today. And in addition to that, after losses, because government is talking about some type of program to help small and middle market businesses down the road. And if you don't track losses, you're not going to be able to quantify them, and you're not going to be able to get any type of assistance. So document everything. Document your canceled orders, document delayed orders, because delayed orders, they impact your ability to produce and get cash as well, and monitor time on managing those business interruptions, and track all costs, direct and indirect, everywhere. So I can't emphasize that enough. And talk to your insurance broker. But going back to cash, I would say that each company should appoint a person. If it's a small startup, then obviously it's going to be a CEO or the CFO. But if it's a bigger company, then there should be one person whose main responsibility or sole responsibility dealing with this problem, this business interruption. And they're the ones who should be working with others to produce cash flow projections on a weekly, if not daily basis. And they're the ones who should be looking at fixed costs such as rent and negotiating with the landlord to see whether there could be some delayed payments. Actually, we think we even need that space going forward. That's what Arlen was saying. It's rethinking how the business is run. They should be the ones who would be reviewing the variable costs immediately, and if that means cutting the hours for the employees or furloughs, it might mean that. And like a lot of people on the phone were saying, cutting costs in general, what's really necessary and what's a must, what's a survival type of a cost, and what's not. And what's not shouldn't be incurred right now. I would also recommend that for smaller businesses in particular, look at the small business as SBA loans. There are SBA loans up to $2 million that are available to small to middle market businesses, probably smaller than middle market businesses. But in those conditions, I think most of those loans are going to require owner guarantees, which are not ideal, but it is that John was saying, you know, we are in survival mode, and some people don't realize that, but I think understanding where you are, whether your business can survive, and then getting as much cash as possible in, that's probably a good idea. And I would say if the business wasn't doing well before this pandemic hit, getting a loan probably wouldn't be a good idea because they might not even get out of this. The business that was healthy and had a healthy balance sheet and they can leverage, I would say, yeah, take a look at that loan, take a look at the line of credit, and if you can maximize it or increase it with your bank. So then check out your tax incentives. There are a bunch of tax incentives that just went out, and every day, every hour, there are more and more of those.
I'm glad that you bring that. It's actually something I need to address next week, because as you're saying, there are a bunch of tax incentives or tax programs that have been released or that have been available for years, but a lot of people aren't aware of them. And so we do want to address that next week so that people are aware of where they can either keep their cash right away. So there's been roll payments, or there's new immediately refundable programs too. So where they can actually garner cash. And Arlen, we probably won't have time to address it today, but I'd like to provide some of the information that you provided earlier in the previous conversation of incentives on the medical side of things, because that too would be something that would be people to explore as well. Arlen, it looks like you're about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the hats I wear is as a medical society executive, and my colleagues are dealing with the issue of canceled conferences. So one is, you know, is this a force majeure or not? Is it an act of God that doesn't cover your cancellation policy? What do you do in the meantime? How do you set up virtual conferences? How do you charge for them? And it's an example of, in the future, are conferences even going to be relevant? Now, a lot of people obviously think that face-to-face schmoozing and just full-body contact is useful, and I agree. But it's another example of how the business model of conferences, events, all kinds of businesses that have to do with getting people together in a brick-and-mortar location will be impacted. So that's number one. And number two, there are all kinds of advanced industry accelerator tax incentives. I know Colorado has them, lots and lots of states have them. And so if you invest in a startup in an advanced industry, you get significant tax benefits. So that's another way of skinning the cat.
Arlen, would you, can we work with you on this offline to be able to present some of those incentives to our?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to provide a website. I mean, the state of Colorado, there's many other states that do this now. They actually did it before the pandemic, just to jumpstart advanced industries, whether it's bioscience, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, et cetera, but I'm happy to do it.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna have to jump in with another poll question. Jordan, if you'd like to read that question quickly.
Yep, here we go. Do you expect to implement some of the techniques or strategies learned during the presentation? Let me launch this so you guys can see it as I read it. Right away, in the next few months in the next year, or maybe sometime in the future, or I don't see an application for this information to my company or clients.
Okay. And so while that poll is going on, John, I wanted to ask you, how would you advise companies to identify their greatest risk factors right now?
Many of them are staring you in the face on your P&L, or your cash flow statement. You know, I always advise people to triage both their revenue and their operating expenses. So look at who your largest clients are, your largest sources of cash. Make sure you're, you know, communicating very clearly and frequently to those folks, so that they can, you know, remain a source of cash for you. And then on the OpEx front, once again, it's kind of like stack ranking things. understanding where you've got your, well, the flip side of OpEx is if you can reduce it, that becomes an upside. Anything you can do to reduce your spend is an upside. So looking at the big numbers first will help you understand that. Now, most companies, even if they're product companies or manufacturing companies, the vast majority of their spend is people related. So, there are a lot of flexible ways to deal with the cost of people, especially on the short term. So those are all opportunities for folks to kind of tackle, and in an order that makes sense, the need for liquidity right now. So definitely look to those financial statements and behind for who's driving the inflow and the outflow, and then pay the most attention to the largest numbers. It's a challenge.
Is this, would you have any suggestions as to how to identify potential partners in helping obtain cash, or maybe manage or modify the way that you're performing business? So in other words, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I mean, there are a number of folks who, are in the business of helping companies perform better. And certainly they're all hearing from all of their clients. I know our firm is right now, and I'm sure everyone else on the line here. We're hearing from our folks who are looking for that very help right now. How do we deal with this? It's not something people naturally would deal with. And to the extent that those folks bring process and sort of a steady hand, some experience, that can be extremely helpful. So look to the people who have provided you good and steady insight in the past, or if you don't have advisors like that, try and find them. But there are many people whose particular expertise is helping companies figure out their operations. Cut back on spending, optimize, marketing mix, so the whole 9 yards around optimizing business outcomes. And those folks, would certainly be a good place to at least start looking in this case.
What is the most influential or effective way for business leaders, managers to respond to the situations?
Well, we've heard it a couple times on this call. First off, I say remain calm, but move with a bias to action. Learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can. This is not a time to wait until you have 100% certainty on a decision before you make it. You definitely, could just die on the vine waiting to get that last bit of information. So try and collect as much as you can, speak with your business advisors, your board, et cetera, and try and make decisions quickly, because every dollar you spend today is a dollar you're not going to have on the far end of this, which you really might wish you had had. So those who are in sort of analysis paralysis, that's a really bad place to be. You want to, gather enough to have the courage of your convictions to actually make a play, which could be standing pat. That's a perfectly rational thing to do depending on your situation. But don't wait for this. Try and move quickly.
Okay.
If I can just chime in on that also. I do believe that it is time to shut your door and bunker in and do projections based on your current financials. And John touched on this, and then Arlen also touched on this. And you have to challenge every single category on your financials. You've got to go through and see if there's a better way to do it, get buy-in from all of your teams, all the executive team, and come up with pro forma financials that actually you can use as a roadmap for both lenders that are credible, and also to track whether your workout plan is going to be successful moving forward.
Could not agree with that more. Great point, Ann.
Thank you.
When you were going through the turnaround experience, were there partners that you worked with outside of the advisory services side of things? Did you find opportunities to be able to partner with other businesses to help turn things around as well?
We partnered more with our suppliers, our lenders, both lenders in terms of our manufacturers that we were using, because their manufacturers, your suppliers could have access to some funds for lending for selling their product. They want you to sell their product. They want you to distribute their product, right? So they might be able to help you. I would reach out to them. And then also you do have to reach out to your bank, but you've got to have that credible pro forma that paints a picture of your strategy to get out of where you are now. Because banks aren't in the business of making bad loans. You know, I know they're partnering with you now, but you've got to give them the excuse to make sure that they continue to lend to you and that they see exactly what you're seeing in terms of how you're getting out of the current situation.
Okay.
If I could make a point, the two basic reasons why businesses fail or you wind up in a turnaround situation is you're no longer or never made a product anybody wanted to buy or no longer wants to buy. And the second is that your business model is no longer viable. So when you deny reality, like some politicians we know have, the longer you deny reality in a pandemic, the more painful it'll be in the long run. It's the same thing with a business. If you don't accept the reality that the target has moved, that the environment has radically changed, that what you're doing no longer works, you're simply going to go out of business or you're going to wind up in a turnaround situation.
That's a very good point in terms of businesses need to innovate during periods like this. I hate to break in because these are very good points, but we do need to take one more poll. So Jordan, if you could read that poll and also let us know what the results were of the last polling question.
Sure. Let me pull up that one first. So the results from the last one, that do you expect to implement some of these techniques or strategies learned during the presentation? 49% said right away. That was 23 votes on that one.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then next.
Yeah. Do you see opportunities for your company or business in this pandemic? Yes, no, or not sure?
All right, and so we have 7 minutes left. So to wrap this up, just wanted to go through each panel or to each panelist to hear last thoughts in regards to this situation. John, let's start with you.
Sure. So my motto over 6 companies has been just live. Living lets you get to that next opportunity to do something interesting. So you really have to gear yourself, and we've heard this from all the panelists, gear yourself to get through this, change what you have to change, make the hard decisions, make them faster than you're comfortable doing. But your focus needs to be on just living if you want your product, your company, and any of your people to come out the far side of this thing. And this is not meant to fan any fears or hysteria. It's just that you need to have that bias for action and that sense of reality that without acting, you know, you could be in a world of hurt. So just live.
Okay. Larisa, how about you?
I would say preserve your relationship with your clients. And I would, like Arlen said, sometimes it means that you do things for free for a while until it's for something in exchange to preserve those relationships. That's the key, because once this is over and business is still viable, those clients will come back to you. So that is number one. Number two, what we say in our firm is, we're not judged based on how well we do when everything is going great. We're judged really based on how we do when things are going south. So let's, everybody should rethink what their strategy is based on what Amber was saying, really developing that strategy and sticking to that strategy together, and seeing this as an opportunity as well to improve your business.
Great, thank you. And I love that point, to look for the opportunities instead of the losses. Because it does seem, as everyone here on the call has been saying, it does seem like this does present significant opportunities. The results from the poll show that 63% said that they do believe that there are opportunities in this pandemic for their companies. Anne, how about you? Any final thoughts?
You know, I think the thing I would stress is do this now. And I think John mentioned this too. You don't have time to waste. You need to put a plan together now. You need to have it hitting your major categories, at least challenge the assumptions on how you're spending. Try to make sure that you preserve cash. Work with people first as fast as you can to get favorable terms in place to preserve the cash that you have, and get buy-in from everybody in your company, and make sure what you're doing is well communicated so everyone feels like a team, that there is a roadmap out of where you are right now. And also there should be, everybody needs to have a realistic view of what's going on. If you're not feeling the effects now, you will. So by having a plan now, I think everybody in a company would feel better working towards that plan. So it calms the anxiety.
What I find most fascinating about this conversation is that for personal investments, a lot of the guidance that is out there is suggesting don't change your plan. If you had a long-term plan, stick to it. But what we're hearing here is this is actually a great opportunity for businesses to take another look at
Yes.
their and make a determination, as you're all saying, as to whether or not you do need to make a significant change. So that plan that you had for the year or for the next 5 years might actually be better off not following that guidance and instead evaluating where there are opportunities. And Arlen, to your point earlier too, where there's risks. If you've been doing something that hasn't been working, and it's certainly not working in this situation, then you need to change to survive. In the last 2 minutes, Arlen, what are your thoughts in regards to this?
I would answer the question as my first career was an academic ear, nose, and throat surgeon. So I spent my career basically taking care of people with upper respiratory complaints. So my final comment was, none of this makes a difference if you wind up in the ICU with a tube in your throat. So take this seriously. Follow the CDC guidelines, follow the WHO guidelines. This is not trivial. Don't blow it off as just the flu. Your first priority is to take care of your health and the health of your family, because frankly, if you're not, it doesn't make a difference what happens to your business or to the economy.
Thank you. All right. We do want to provide an opportunity for people to ask questions. We've been monitoring the line to see if there have been questions that have come in. We haven't seen any. If you do have a question, we won't have time in the last minute to respond to those questions, but we can send them out to our panelists afterwards to solicit feedback. Send an email to info@taxforward.org. And also, Arlen, thank you for sharing with us the tax incentive for Colorado, the page for that. So we'll share that with everyone. We'll post that on our website.
Sure.
Would like to thank our panelists again for participating in this discussion. So, hope everyone stays safe and healthy this weekend. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.